Authors Alcove. This is our second ever book club and our first Meet the Author book club. I am so super excited. And today I'm joined with three of our hosts, as well as our author, Chelle Cypress, the author of the amazing book, which I absolutely loved. It's my favorite book in 2024 that I have read so far, Unmasking the Curse. This book club we have all read, so there is going to be spoilers. So if you have not read the book, I do have an interview with Chelle that I did. I will put it in the show notes. Stop it right now, watch that, and then read the book, and then you can come back. All right, so when you realize that it is a must read, come back. Okay. Before we introduce our author, I want to introduce our hosts. First of all, I am Agnes Wolfe. I am a middle grade fantasy author. I'm not yet published, but I should be soon. And so first, I would like Rebecca Maeve Hartwell to go. She is also a romantic fantasy writer, editor. She can correct me if I said anything wrong. And she also is a brand new podcaster, has her first podcast out. Rebecca, could you please just share a little bit about yourself and share what your favorite genre to read is and what your all-time favorite book is?
Absolutely. So yeah, my name is Rebecca Maeve Hartwell. That is the name that I publish and write romantic fantasy under. My series is the Unlocked series. The first book is A Heart of Flame. And I am also a developmental or structural editor with Heartbound Editing, and that's H-A-R-T, like the female deer. And I love editing all kinds of fantasy and romance and historical, so this month's book was right up my alley. That is also very much my favorite genre to read, and I absolutely cannot pick favorites, so I'm going to ignore that question.
And now I'd like to introduce Marie Manning. She is an aspiring author and my longtime friend. Marie, could you share about your favorite genre and your all-time favorite book?
Absolutely. So people's experiences always are compelling to me. So my favorite genre is actually biographies. But I love when you have a fiction book like this one, where you implement people's experiences into the book. You could see that was happening. And I loved that about it. It made the book great. I am also an author. I am almost done with my first book. It's a collection of poetry and short stories. I'm very excited about it. I have one short story left to write. And then I also am a public speaker. And I work with people who have autoimmune disorders to create a reference guide to help them explain to doctors. Yeah, me too. To explain to doctors their symptoms. So I'm very excited about that as well. And I'm really thrilled to be here. When Agnes talked about doing this, I was like, oh, I'm so in. I want to meet authors. This is like a dream for readers to get to read a book and then talk with the author. I'm so excited that you're here, Chelle. Thank you so much for being with us today.
And finally, before we get to Chelle, I would like to invite Amber Letter to speak. She is a voracious reader as well as the rest of us. She is our only non-writer. In fact, I would argue she is probably our most sought after opinion, just because, you know, we like to hear what our writer friends say, but we want to know what our readers that are not writers have to say. And notice we're all agreeing, Amber. But so Amber, what is your favorite genre and your all-time favorite book? Which neither of you answered my question.
For that very kind introduction, Agnes. I have to say, Chelle, I came to this group last week and I was so excited. I thrive as the underdog, so I appreciate being with these amazingly intelligent women. I am not a writer. You're all inspiring me though to do bigger and better things. But I was an English teacher, and I was a teacher for 16 years. And I turned 40, had a little midlife crisis with what am I doing? I lost my dad to ALS, so I decided I was going to work for the ALS Association. So I've been throwing big events and doing lots of fundraising, and it has been so fulfilling and rewarding, and I'm enjoying it so much. And yes, I do love to read. I really rotate between genres. I used to go through a phase where if it said it was fiction, I was like, who has the time? And now I don't like to read anything but fiction. I don't know what's going on. I just read Lessons in Chemistry, and then I read a book called I Who Have Never Known Man. It was so different. So I don't know. I will read anything. And Chelle, I have to tell you, this was the first time I've ever read a book in this genre. ever. I mean, Rebecca told me all of the different words that this genre would be, and not even one. So this was a different experience for me, and I really enjoyed it, and I'm excited because I have so many friends who have read this genre. But anyway, favorite genre, probably literary fiction right now at this moment. Oh, I've read The Alchemist many a times. I just love that book so much. This is a hard question. Um I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. That's tough. But I really did enjoy your book. I'm so happy to be here among these amazingly talented women. So thank you for having me.
And I forgot to say what mine is. My favorite genre is middle grade fantasy, which is what I write. And my favorite all-time book, a lot of them. I'll just get, since no one
You
else
can't
said
even
any, I'm
answer
not
your
gonna say
own
anything.
question.
How can you pick? I mean, it's like picking between your kids.
Yeah.
There's no way.
Yeah,
Too
it's
many
like
books
I
to
like
love.
so many of them for different reasons. I guess I would say Inkheart. That's probably my absolute favorite is Inkheart, just because if you're not familiar with it, it's about characters who actually come to life or literally come to life. That was actually what I was thinking was I would say this time. Although you ask me another time and I'll say something totally different. But
I
all
think
right, so now it's time to introduce our author. But before I do, I want to say how excited I am to have her, because she was actually the third person I ever interviewed for my podcast. She was the first person that I had asked, and I was so super excited. And so it's really awesome that she gets to be the first person on my Meet the Author book club. It makes me so happy. And I just kind of feel like I'm doing this journey with her, even though, we're like worlds apart. So anyway, welcome, Chelle. So happy to have you. Do you mind just sharing just a little bit about yourself and your background?
Yeah. So first, I am so honored too to be here. Like, I'm very, very excited to chat about my book. And like, it really isn't like, it's very hard because you don't want to spoiler your book to talk with other readers. So like to have readers like ask me like the in-depth questions is like very exciting, because I do like to hide a lot of Easter eggs and do a lot of stuff in my writing. And I don't really get to talk about it. So I'm like super stoked. But anyways, I am Chelle Cypress. I am the author of Unmasking the Curse. It is my debut novel. It is a Beauty and the Beast retelling set in a Pride and Prejudice world where the female main protagonist is bound to an enchanted porcelain mask to keep her deadly blight at bay, as you guys know. And then I am an indie author. I published this book in November of 2023. And it's just been a really cool journey to grow as a writer, to get to connect with other writers and readers, and be part of such an amazing community.
Thank you so much. Now I'm going to turn back to our hosts, and I'm going to ask you guys each the question: what is something that really stuck out about this book that you absolutely loved? I think we'll go clockwise from right after me. So Dawn, Amber, and then Rebecca, and then I will go after.
Okay, so I'm going to get just a little bit personal here. First of all, the book pulled me in pretty quickly, which I was thrilled about, since I generally mostly read biographies. But one thing for me is that I have never understood the pull with meditating. Never. Like, I would meditate with people and I'd be like, nah, I couldn't turn my brain off. I got no benefit from it. You can ask Agnes. I would still be stressed out after yoga with her. And this book put meditating into perspective for me. The visual of letting stones slip through your fingers, I found myself doing, without even thinking about it, doing the breathing exercises and envisioning the things that they did. And for the first time in my life at 47 years old, I'm not ashamed to say, I was able to let go of some tensions and was able to meditate in a way I'd never been able to before. So for me, that was incredibly profound and incredibly helpful to me. But I also just love your imagery in your books. In your book, I'm saying books because you're going to tell us when the next one's coming, right? Yeah, okay. And I connected because of my own broken relationship with my mother. I connected with the book pretty deeply, but I found myself carving out time in my life to read, which was wonderful. It was very good, very good. I enjoyed it very much.
Right, Amber?
So as I said before, this was the first time I've read this type of book. And for me, it was the connection between the two main characters. If I had something else to do, I was going to that next chapter because I was so tired of them not connecting. We'll use that word. They just kept getting so close and just, they both would fight it off. And I got it, I completely understood why Ariana, put her foot down towards the end and why Silas was trying so hard to keep her at bay. But the attraction between them and their words and just the visualizations you use, I agreed with the imagery and just the surroundings and the beauty of it all. You just wanted them to find that place both within them and both outside. Like, where was it going to be? Where were they going to reconnect finally? And they would always just come so close, and I just wanted that moment for them. So I wanted to be in that moment with them. So I just appreciated that so much, and I was excited for it. And I really just was excited to see where the story was going to go. And I had the feeling of the Beauty and the Beast right at the beginning, because I was definitely reading this at a surface level. I try to do that lately. If somebody said, "Oh, you'll never see the twist," I read for the twist, and then I ruin the whole book for myself. For this, I was sort of reading it to say, okay, what are people attracted to in this type of genre? Because again, it was a new experience, but I really also just allowed myself to just get excited and have that heart flutter and just couldn't wait until, the big climax. And I'm speaking figuratively of when, excuse me, I'm sorry if that was inappropriate. Of when they were all, when, this was all going to come to a head and, they were going to, were they going to peacefully be together? I needed to see where that was going to go. So I appreciated so much, for lack of a better phrase, the what is it called? The journey, the hero's journey. So I thought you did a really great job with that.
So it's awesome hearing a reader's perspective on that. As a developmental editor, I have a really hard time like turning that part of my brain off. So I'm always reading it for oh, where's this going to connect? And that's going to go over here. And I can see how they're setting this up. I agree that your steamy tension is phenomenal. Like every moment after their wedding night, I'm just going, do it again, do it again, do it again. But apart from that, I thought you did a fantastic job of paying things off. Whether that's her farewell with her mother, her last moment with the priestess who had like tortured her, and your climax and your resolution, everything that you set up paid off so beautifully. I loved getting to those moments and going, yeah, I see what you did there.
Absolutely.
I absolutely loved the aspect of how you handle the mistreatment of people, because I could just think that there's so many people that we don't necessarily actually hide them in a room and make them wear a mask. But I just really like the way that you kind of approached how, the outcasts of our society. And there are really people like that. And it might not even be in the broader society, but like in little groups. And I just really liked how you handled that. And I really liked that theme. Also, I am one of those people who I'm almost a prude when it comes to spice in a novel. But I actually appreciated I felt like yours was very tastefully done. I'm not one of those that likes to read like 6 pages. Like when I read Fourth Wing, I was like, okay, all right, let's go now. So I liked how tastefully done yours was. I felt like it was just enough to be like, ooh, but not overkill. And then I also was very intrigued by the curse, and I noticed how the curse like was brought out by trauma. So that's a question I'm going to be asking later on, is about the fact that, both of them had their curse come about and trauma. And then I'm going to have to reference, so that way people know to read Rebecca's book, because her magic system is based on trauma, or like on trauma. And so like, I'm very curious, like, about that. So I will be asking more questions later about that. So now that we've all answered that question, I am going to open up to questions. So I do have a few of my own, but I will ask someone else to ask first. Before our first question, I do want to just explain the format. After someone asks a question and Chelle has answered, the mic is open for anyone. If you want to comment or on what she says, or add in your own questions. Anytime there is a lull, I will either pull from one of the questions or call on someone else. So just, it's kind of like you're all open. So just hop in. I figure the first person I will ask to ask a question is Rebecca.
Cool.
Are you
So
ready?
I am personally a massive horse nerd. I grew up on a horse ranch in Nevada, and a history nerd. That's my primary hobby, particularly around clothing. And obviously your book contains both of those elements, not in huge like central ways, but they're in there because it's more or less high fantasy. I was just wondering what sort of research went into that, and if you ever consulted with like a topic expert or something like that to make sure that you were getting the details either factually correct or to fit whatever you were going for.
So for a lot of like, because I did try to make it as historically accurate as I possibly could. I don't have a lot of experience with horses or even materials. I spent a lot of time on Google. Like I was constantly Googling like what pace does a horse like, canter at, or how often can they canter at, or how often can they gallop at, and like when do they need to change out the horses. And so I tried very hard to try to make it as accurate as possible, but also like allowing a little bit of stretch, right? Because it's like even like Silas, like he pushed that horse all the way through. Oh, we could spoilers, right? This is a spoiler talk. Okay,
Yes,
cool. So like
spoilers.
he pushed that horse all the way through Preston to get to the inn, and I was like, that's probably a stretch. But I'm like, we're gonna use a little like fantasy, like like a little literary license to be like, okay, like that's probably a stretch in reality, but like I'm gonna roll with it. But I did try to look up like how often those things had to occur. And then there's a lot of stuff I just kind of figured would be like off scenes, right? So that people might not, things that might happen, but you don't really see them happening off scene, like switching out the horses, like, in Deville when they are like stopping or after Deville, which I actually had a scene and then removed it because it just, as you know, as developmental editor, things slow the plot, and you're just trying to like give new information all the time. So I tried to just be as accurate as I could with that. And then there was a lot of like looking up like desserts, foods, fabrics that were used, patterns that were used. I have Pinterest boards all over the place, like with different patterns and stuff like that. So I tried really hard to delve into it. I also listened to a lot of YouTube videos where people talked about like Pride and Prejudice and like that time period. So like there was this lady, and I cannot remember her name, but she did like this huge like 15 arc episode about like breaking down like all the cultural systems, and I listened to all of them. And so like I tried very hard to do the best I could with the knowledge I could find with a little bit of writing license to make it as accurate as possible.
Well, it's very cool to hear that you were going for Regency, because I was going to ask, because there's hints in there, and I do mostly go off clothing, but I'm paying attention to other stuff, and there's like it could have been as early as like medieval, and then most of like my imagining for it was sort of late Victorian, like 1890s. So fascinating to hear that you were going for Regency.
Yeah, I was kind of like teetering between Regency and like Victorian, just because like there's it's so hard because like there's such a weird like switch in like structure, architecture, and like so you look at like the Georgian period, like the Regency, the Edwardian, it all kind of meshes over, and so like there is a lot of like overlap, and so I can totally see how it can come across a little bit Victorian, but also like a little, a little bit older than Regency, just because like there is some bizarre overlap throughout the whole historical period.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. It's a great question.
So I don't think that I'm spoiling anything for Rebecca's book by saying that her Heart of Flame book, which I am absolutely loving, I've not finished it yet, but I am definitely hooked. So hers, has trauma, is actually plays a part in the magic system. And so I find that very interesting because I felt like yours did too.
Mm-hmm.
And because both of them had the curse activate when trauma happened. Do you mind sharing if there really is that connection and expound on that a little bit?
So basically, I was really trying to focus on, I think I was looking at it from like a mental health perspective, is that a lot of people struggle when like trauma is inflicted on us, right? When trauma happens, there like things change. And like the higher your, like there's this thing called the ACEs scores, the like childhood experiences of trauma score. And so like the higher your ACEs score, like the more like detrimental things will happen, like are predicted to happen in your life, with like your health and mental health and things of that sort, even addiction. And so when I was writing it, I really wanted to focus on the fact that like trauma does have like an external effect, right? And so that's why these traumatic experiences happened to them and triggered like their curses to awaken and triggered like this darkness to awaken within them, because I did want to show like there is like this like there was something physical to show like what the trauma looked like, because so many people carry trauma and you just never see it. And so when I was writing, I definitely wanted to make that the link between the two.
So would there be people in this universe who had were already predestinated, like had the curse, but they just never had any traumatic event?
Yeah, so
So
it's
never
basically,
awoke?
yeah, so it's basically, or even like I look at it like they're like, because people can go through similar events, but however they're predisposed, like their own genetics, their family systems, what, you know, all these different factors can push them towards like experiencing the trauma in a way that's like unmanageable, like in real life, versus like maybe someone who has a very loving, compassionate, like family system who helps you deal with the trauma where it's more manageable, right? And so I do think that in the systems, like there is a lot of like bloodlines affected to, like the curse goes through different bloodlines, right? Like those who were part of, you know, the Cassiels, they ended up being cursed with the bloodline issues, and so then their children, and so it's like I'm kind of painting and portraying like these generational curses, these generational traumas that we as people are dealing with. And so there are people who do have like predispositions to have their curse awoken, but for whatever reason it doesn't. Either, like I said, their family system's good, they're not as affected by whatever happened, they're able to cope with it in their own way. And a great example is like Naomi, right? Like Naomi's had some stuff happen, right? And by the end of the book, and yet her sister hasn't had like a curse awoken, but she definitely could be predisposed because her sister is. And I think that there are definitely people who might be predisposed, who either might or might not have like curses awoken in the future.
Ooh.
Yes.
So that actually kind of leads into my question. And I feel bad asking this again in a room full of writers. Where did you start? So, I mean, I would love to know, and I'm sure this was years in the making, maybe not, but did you start with the curse? Did you start with a character, Ariana? I mean, what was the first thought, or what was the first founding idea that sort of culminated into what is now a fantastic book?
Oh, that's such a great question. So I started writing poetry before I wrote the novel. And so for all of like 2020, 2021, I was writing poetry, and I wrote this poem about how I felt like I had to hide parts of who I am, how I felt trapped behind a mask, how I felt like I had to play like this game of pretend. And one day I was like sitting, like kind of writing the poetry, and I was like, well, what if this was an actual mask? Like, what if this was a physical, tangible thing? What if like what I'm feeling is a physical, tangible thing? And I was like, okay. And then I was like, well, then it has to be fantasy because like, I mean, you can do like a magical realism and things of like that sort, like kind of like Water for Chocolate is, and like, you know, fiction. But I was like, it would make more sense to be fantasy. And so I sat down and I just started writing you know, these characters, and just where I kind of saw them going. I'm what's called a pantser, which means I'm a discovery writer, right? So my characters kind of talk to me. Some people are plotters where they plot everything out really thoroughly. I take multiple drafts and multiple years. This book took me 2 years to write, edit, and get published. Because my characters kind of go amongst in my brain and do what they want, and then I have to write it down and then trim it down and make it make sense.
Thank you.
So one of the things that stood out most to me when I was reading through that would just keep catching my attention was your protagonists, meaning both of them, their emotional landscape was so deep and so high, and it had so much going on there. I was just wondering what sort of mindset or methodology or anything like that that you used in checking that they were grounded and consistent and anything like that, especially now that I know that you're a pantser. How do you approach that? That's just sort of emotional landscape curation, I want to say.
Well, I will say like the interesting thing is I'm big on layering, right? So even like book two, I pantsed book two, and then I scrapped it because with pantsing you're usually like, no, this is not right, and then I rewrote it. But I do a lot of layering. So oftentimes where some of my friends who plot, they can write like 2 or 3 drafts and be done. I write 10. Because I have to go through and really ask myself the questions. And I asked myself the question, is this how Silas would react? Is this how Ariana would react? Would they actually say this? Does this match their feelings? And then I also have like music for each of them. So each character kind of has their own music, their own sounds, their own likes, their own dislikes. And after a while, like you start hearing them more clearly. Like they become like I don't know. It's just I don't know if this makes sense. We just like start hearing how they would talk more clearly. And even like writing book two, it's been really interesting because sometimes I'll like fall back on like some of their old habits. And then I have to ask myself, like, is this an old habit that they've grown through? Or is this an old habit that's going to have to be actually fixed because like they kind of like bandaged over it, right? And like my goal was to make my characters feel really very real. And they make very poor decisions, and they make dumb choices like all up and down, and are very like, but I think where a lot of people really enjoyed it is they do feel very tangible. Even some of like the people who haven't like it like talk about my characters like they're real people. Like and so I'm like, win.
I'm a firm believer that watching characters make bad decisions is far more entertaining than watching them make good ones.
Yeah.
And the thing about it is that we do it too.
Yeah.
We do it. It's like we can't step out of our lives enough to see that it's a disaster, but we can see it when we're reading a book, and it's like, no, we make the same decisions too.
Yeah.
I love this immersion that you put around it. I do the same thing when I'm writing about specific people and writing specific things. I have certain songs, certain things that and I love. I'm not the only one. I thought it was weird, but I mean, I probably am still weird, but still, it's nice to know that I have my fellow weirds with me. But I love that immersion. I did want to ask about her dad.
Mm-hmm.
You only just brush across the surface of how her father reacted to her curse. Was he better than her mom?
No, I think he was very absent, right? And this is kind of like, because I did kind of make the mother lean narcissistic, right? Especially like I think like very covert narcissistic kind of attitude. Like there's a lot of victim mentality there. And a lot of times when there is that kind of family system, I do look at Ariana as the scapegoat, and Naomi is a little bit of the golden child slash hero child. But a lot of times in the system, like I think the dad was probably more of like the flying monkey type, right? He just kind of like enabled her. And then there was also some class difference between the two. So like Mrs. Park came from a higher class, like, and I think I kind of brushed over it quickly when she's talking about like brushing Ariana's hair and talking about how Ariana shouldn't marry for love, like that, because she married for love. And there was someone who like, so there was like this class difference as well, where she married down and into poverty for love. And so I think there's just all these layers to where the father really wasn't present in her life, and therefore I didn't see a point making him present in the story. Interestingly enough, is he was in the first 3 or 4 drafts, but like a lot of developmental editors will tell you, they're like, if they're not doing anything, they need to go. And he didn't add anything to the story. He didn't do anything. And so when I look at him as a character with Ariana, from Ariana's perspective, he's just very absent. I don't really think he added any at all to the abuse, but I also don't think he added any like love or joy either.
I was actually going to ask about the mom. And so, you have that brief moment at the end where she says, I'm sorry, before she dies. Do you feel that Ariana felt closure when her mom died?
No, she doesn't.
I feel like
I will say this much. That is something that's worked. Okay, so from my writing self, you can tell I like there to be problems, and I like there to be problems, and I like there to be consequences, right? So every action has a consequence. And I think that's where I go as a writer. And so there were a lot of actions at the end of book one, and there are a lot of consequences that are happening in book two. And one of those consequences is Ariana having to process through the grief. And I will say also Naomi processing through her own way of dealing with the grief of their mother's loss and her own perspective of how things happened, right? And I love, can I tangent real quick? I love writing in first person because I get to see everyone's perspective. And I know that maybe that might not be everyone's favorite, and that's totally cool, but I love it because I want to know how everyone sees things differently. And even like Silas and Ariana and like, you know, Beatrix and Naomi, everyone's going to see that those events wildly differently based on like how they perceive the world. And I'm very excited to share different perspectives coming through book two, book three, and subsequent novellas.
That
Can
was
I just
something
say-
I really noticed was I think it was maybe chapter 2 or chapter 3, the first one from Theo's POV.
Three.
And it was, I just, like, from the first sentence, I'm just like, oh, we are seeing an antagonist's point of view on a situation that, as a woman, like, inherently understand from the other side. It was fascinating. I don't think I've read an antagonist POV that hit quite like that before. That was excellent.
Thank you. I have to say, Theo was my favorite to write. Like, there's something, it's just because he was so fun to write.
That was actually going to be one of my questions.
I was going to ask who your favorite person to write was, and now we find out, but it must be interesting to like dive into this evil, you know, but at the same time, he's a very broken person at the same time. That's very cool. But I will say, you were talking about writing in the first person. A lot of books that I've read handle it badly. You don't. It isn't.
Thank you.
Flows. It sounds right. You make the shift easily. I felt like it was really beautifully done. I felt like it was handled really well. Do you guys agree with me? What do you guys think?
Yeah, first person isn't one of my favorites. I tend to lean towards like limited or close third. That's what I write in. That's what I prefer to read. But yeah, no, this first person, especially since each lens was so clear. Like, even if I, skipped catching whose name was at the top of the chapter, it was clear throughout whose lens I was viewing it through. I could jump in the middle of a chapter, and in a paragraph or two, I could know whose POV I was in, not because other people were named, not because XYZ, but because their worldview was so clear and so unique, and that was excellently handled.
I actually thought that same thing because I tend to like third person as well. And I didn't even really remember that it was first person until you guys brought it up. And I think that it's because it was so well done. And I think you would catch those sort of, because I'm the same way where I prefer third person, but I don't think because it was so well done. And especially because I think another thing that I have read, even some really popular books, I don't feel like they do a good job of switching from character to character when they do the first person point of view. And I felt like you did a really good job. I'd love to hear something from Amber.
Usually I'm very talkative. I really liked that even though you did first person point of view and it kept changing the lens and the perspective, the story continued exactly where it was. I'm going to throw out a book that I tried to read that I did terribly. I did read it, first Game of Thrones book. I remember like I loved one of the characters' story, and then I'd have to wait so many other characters. Like I would flip through to get to her story so I could continue. I loved that even though the character changed, we still were in the same story. I wouldn't have to wait chat. Like I just loved that. And it proves that your characters were so well combined. They were so connected that even though they were two different characters, it was the same thought.
Yeah.
I feel like you really drove that home. But I want to go back a couple steps because that was something that really hit me hard, that the mother said, "I'm sorry." And I wanted to ask you, was that purposeful? And did you think about that decision? Because she looked up at Naomi and said, "I love you." And I'm like, oh, here it comes. What's she going to say? And did you think on that? Did you think on
I
that?
did.
Okay, for her to say, I'm sorry, and not, I
Yeah.
love you.
Yeah.
Okay, I'd love to hear
Because
That moment hit. That moment landed.
yeah,
thank
landed,
you. Because
it
she
landed
wouldn't.
in not a great place.
I think the hard things, I really try to think
Yeah.
about why my characters do what they do, even the ones who don't have perspectives, right? And so Mrs. Park, it's like, I think she looks at Ariana, and I think deep in her own way, in her own shallow way, she knows how, she loves her. But I think that she is unable to look at the choices that she's made in her life, and therefore like blames Ariana for everything. And I think that the time that she spent in the Terrells, the time like, you know, in the cellar and having her eye taken out and having to deal with that torture, I feel like she had some space to really think about, you know, maybe some of the consequences of her actions. And I think like there was this flicker of moment, like this flicker of like realization that like, had she not pushed her daughter to marry someone she didn't want, maybe none of this would happen, right? Because like where are the, and like I played a lot with who's the villain of the story, who's the true villain, and like that was my point, is like villains are not always like the people we believe they are at the beginning of the book. Like sometimes the villains are the ones pulling the strings in the background. And so that's like, you know, to me Mrs. Park to some degree was kind of her own demise and her own villain, because she set these things in motion. So
I
Yeah,
will
that was-
say, having had a kind of complicated relationship with my own mom, a simple sorry
Yeah.
is not going to do it.
Yeah.
It's just not.
Yeah.
You can't have real healing that way. And just like in the book, my own mom passed away, and there's a whole process that
Yep.
you have to go through with somebody that you can't go to and say, what you did was wrong.
Yeah.
What you believed a lie about me, and that was not right. And I have to fill my life with truth because of what you did. And I don't think that there's any way that that's going to be a trauma that's going to be easy.
No, no, exactly. And that's why it's like, I really like, there's a lot of emotional, like, I'm going to be honest, like book 2 is agony, right? Like it, because it leaves you on this like high of like how, like there's some resolution, but there really isn't. Like I look at book 1, I'm almost like, gosh, like this is almost like a prequel to like the real story, because it's like now that like we've set the blocks, like, you know, we're kind of like, you know, gonna go deal with the consequences now. And so book 2 is just, writing is like so much faster pace, and the consequences are just unraveling, and there's so much emotional things that they're going to have to go through, and it's not as easy as being like, well, like that just happened, even, you know. And I will say there is a jump skip in time, because like as developmental editors know, we can't tell everything because it just drags out the story. I tried with the first version of book 2, and that's why I got canned. So there is like some jump time, but there is still a lot of processing, and I did try to buffer a little bit of processing time between book 1 and book 2, but it doesn't, like there's still so much to resolve, and there's so much for Ariana to work through, and so much like mixed emotions, right? Like that weird, like I loved my mother, but also like she caused all this pain, but also like her feelings of like having to take blame for everything, right? Because she doesn't know any better. So yeah, it's complex and messy, and I'm gonna try to handle it with as much care as I possibly can.
I think in cases like that, people are not just grieving the mother that died, but they're also grieving the mother that they wish they would have had.
Yes.
And I think that's a huge part of that healing process after somebody you love who's hurt you dies.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the other thing too is that you also grieve who you could have been if you'd been nurtured.
Yes.
That's a whole process.
Yep.
You know, when you grow up with a lot of abuse.
Yep.
And yeah, that's something it'll be interesting to see how Ariana deals with that too.
Yeah, it's definitely gonna be a little bit of a darker lens, right? Like, because you're going through this like heavy grief, these very like traumatic events that happened. And you know, I think, and this is just me personally, because I do read a lot of fantasy, I think one of the things I really wanted to focus on is the fact that like not everyone has the fight response. Like there are 4 trauma responses, my friend. And I feel like fantasy books right now is like, we're a fighter. I'm not affected by my trauma at all. I'm gonna go whoop some butt. And I was like, I want to do the opposite, which I do love reading those books too, but I really wanted to do the opposite. And so it's messy and sticky. And, you know, that's why Silas flees a bunch and like Ariana freezes. And there is going to be, you know, some more of working through those trauma responses and you know, dealing with the ramifications of what they've done.
I had a question about the stark cultural contrasts between the region where Ariana grew up and Preston. Though the entire mentality is different, the clothing is different. What was your inspiration for that?
So, I would say like I did use Regency like kind of era to really inform some of the cultural aspects, underneath the Hollow Haven umbrella, right? Because you have Hollow Haven, Crella, and Deville. They're all kind of like in this like underneath this umbrella. And so I did use a lot of Regency inspirations where there's like a heavy focus on marriage and there's a heavy focus on like patriarchy and like this hierarchy, and just kind of making the world very small for Ariana, right? And so when I thought about the growth I wanted her to see, I was like, she needs to be somewhere where she doesn't have to play small anymore, right? And so Preston is actually, because I live in Central Oregon, Preston's a little bit based on Central Oregon where I live in, because there's like big green trees and mountains. And I was like, well, how great would it be for her to go from this like, like what does Braille call it in like book 2? She was like this backwater like podunk like like town like of Prella to like this beautiful like majestic place in Preston where they have a completely different system. And I think I really wanted to show like the stark contrast and stark difference between Hollow Haven's rule and Preston's rule, because like to me Hollow Haven is like their rule is very overbearing over their people, and I do explore more of that in book 2 because I did write in first person, and Ariana's kind of been closed off, so she doesn't really have a lot of that experience. However, we will be getting to delve more through other characters perspectives into other areas of the novel. And then where Preston, I got to really focus on just creating a world that is a little bit more open, a little bit more friendly, a little bit more caring about others, like communal. That's the word I'm looking for, more communal, right? And I wanted to give this communal feel where people are there for one another, where people care about each other. And I think it might be like even a little bit of a wish for myself, to be in a place where people just, support each other and care about each other.
It's about community.
Yeah. Where
So I
one
have
I
a
think is about
question.
control, the other is about community.
So I have a
Mhm.
question for the rest of you. Because my next question is going to be, are you going to develop any of the characters in the second book more? But I want to hear from the rest of you, who would you like to hear more of?
Oh, I really like, I can't think of his name right now. I like Silas's valet.
Oh, Vincent.
He was
Vincent.
excellent.
There
Thank
is going to be
you.
more Vincent. I can
How
tell you that.
brilliant is Vincent. Now, I will say this about Duncan, is that like his reaction to Silas's interest in Ariana, I thought, well, that's a little weird, but maybe he's just an overprotective brother-in-law. And then as soon as the Taylor gal, Layla, thank you. I'm terrible with the names right now.
No, you're
As
doing
soon
so
as she
great.
said, I've been writing letters and Beatrix never
Yeah.
has responded, I went, oh, Duncan's the bad guy. I was like,
I was trying so hard to just like sprinkle hints. I'm sorry, get so
you
excited
did a
that you found my hints.
beautiful job.
Because I'm like trying to
Beautiful job.
sprinkle them without like being outright. So you're not like completely blindsided where like, what are you talking about? But also like keeping it subtle enough that it's like, if you're really paying attention, like you see my hints, and I love dropping hints. It's my favorite thing to do. I foreshadow all over the place. I drop Easter eggs all over the place. It's actually what brings me joy. You finding that hint brings me the most joy.
But Vincent being like, yeah, I don't like Duncan.
Mhm.
I thought, wow. And he's been running taking care of Silas's stuff, and shows a great deal of wisdom and discernment is the word I'm looking for. I want to see a lot more from him.
He is okay. Okay, I'll say this much. He is an important character in the book. In the next coming up books, there's a really good reason he doesn't like Duncan, and he is going to get some page time for sure.
Good. Okay.
He's also okay. And can I say one little thing about Vincent? He actually didn't exist until like the 6th or 7th draft, and I was writing, and I was like, gosh, I'm like, Silas really needs someone to bounce something off of. And I keep talking about this like Stuart, and I was like, why don't I make him a character? And I swear he was like, hello, I'm Vincent and this is my backstory. And I was like, oh Oh, okay then. And so yeah, no, he's actually like probably one of my favorites too.
So my fellow writers, when a character presents themselves to you like that, doesn't it feel like magic?
Mhm.
It feels like the deepest inspiration ever. It's the most
Yes.
amazing thing. I love it. And you wrote him beautifully, and he just showed himself that way.
Well, I think I'm most excited to see more about both sisters, both Beatrix and Naomi. Especially Naomi. She felt like such a well-rounded character, and I just loved how unexpected her worldview was given her circumstances. So having seen how book one ended for her,
Yeah.
I'm fascinated to see where her arc goes from there and how much of her original self she maintains, how much that needs to change or develop or anything like that. So my answer is Naomi.
I love it. Well, and I will say, Beatrix and Naomi are going to be getting novellas. So between book 2 and 3, because they do have their own journeys to go on. They do have their own like love interests. They do have their own growth that they need to do. They do have their own like demons they have to deal with. And when I started writing book 2 was like, I will say another reason why I had to scrap the first draft is Naomi took over book 2 at first. She totally took over it. And then she like had a love interest and he totally took over. And I was like, Silas and Ariana are like secondary characters to this. I'm like, this is not working. And so I was like, okay, girl, you need your own novella. Here you go. And so I actually started writing Naomi's novella, and it's very interesting because I think like I'll say this much, is her perspective. She doesn't realize because she is younger, right? She's like almost 20. Like she's, dealt with a lot of loss. I think she's very naive, right? And I think she's always had this attitude where like, oh, like I can figure anything out. I can do whatever I want. And now like, reality's kind of smacked her around, and she's like, oh snap. And so she's trying to figure that out. And I will say like there is a huge character growth, I think, for her really seeing reality, right? Like having some of that like hopefulness in her, but also seeing kind of like the darker edges I think she's ignored for a really long time.
That's cool.
Okay, so I love a comeback story. I'm not saying I want good things for this character, but when I saw Theo at the end of the book, he's alive, right? I'm like so afraid that I missed something at the end of the right? Theo's alive at the end of the book. Is he dead? Did he die at the end of the book?
Okay, that's all I'll say is that the manor did crumble.
Okay, I took it that he was alive. So I'm glad it's not like you wrote the words like Theo was dead.
I did not write those words.
Okay. I was gonna feel real. In my mind, he was still alive. When I put everything together, he was still alive.
Okay. I don't know. We'll have to see.
Okay, regardless if he is still alive or not, I would like to maybe know more a little bit about that family and that story, because when you think about it, like he was her mirror. They both had horrible parents. He did not need a curse to have evil within, but at the end with the mask and all of those, like the way that their stories kind of connected at the end as well. I just would like to maybe, was there more history there? Like, is there a little bit there? Okay. All right.
I don't know. Maybe. We'll have to wait and see.
Everybody just looked at me and I thought, oh my God, I missed
such a relatable response, Chelle.
What?
That is such a relatable response of, I'm not telling you.
That's okay. As long as I literally miss it.
I'll say this, so bad. Theo is probably one of my favorite characters to write. That's all I will say. The funny thing is when I wrote him and we went into beta reading, everyone's like, this guy is so flat. And I was like, okay. And they're like, but why? And so I really had to sit with it and be like, but why? But why is he the way he is? And it was kind of like Vincent as well. Like, he's like, well, like, this is what happened to me. And these are all the things. And I'm like, oh, and I really liked the, kind of playing a lot of parallels with him and Ariana. And I love that you picked up on that, because there is this level of like, they both dealt with abuse. They both dealt with things, but they handled it totally differently, right? Where Ariana is very self-deprecating. She's very internalizer, right? Theo is the opposite. He's an externalizer. And I think that I really enjoyed showing the contrast of how people handle abuse and trauma differently. And I love
I
that
know.
book.
I feel like nobody mentioned Brielle, and that's somebody that she was somebody that I really thought I disliked. And then as the book went on, I started to like more. And then I was like,
Mhm.
I have a feeling she's going to play a bigger part. Do you think is
yeah.
she going to?
So I will say she also is going to get her own little spinoff as well. So we're going to get to hear a little bit more from her. She definitely has her time in her spinoff and in book 2 right now. The problem with being a pantser is I did outline book 3, but the problem with being a pantser is sometimes those outlines change. So it's just we'll have to see how my characters feel with all the things I have to deal with. But yes, Brielle's another one I love writing because I did try to write her very like over the top, but again, like her over the top attitude is all like this act, right? And I tried to layer my characters because it's like I just didn't want people like, oh, like whatever you think they are at the surface, like there's always something else going on underneath. And I really tried to play around with that. So
Is Brielle cursed too? I just wanted to be sure.
Not that I know of, not that she has told me yet. So but no, like as of right now, like Silas and Ariana are the ones who are cursed, and Brielle has her own backstory. And I will say this much, like I am delving into a little bit of her backstory about like her time with the Aurelians, a little bit of her backstory of her, her love with her love Ren. So there is like a little bit of writing I've been doing, exploring some of her backstory to flesh out parts of the upcoming books.
So her knowledge about how two cursed people can have a connection if they're mated, that's because of her time with the Aurelians, where they were keeping that knowledge to themselves and to try to keep people from being powerful and free.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. Thank you so much for clarifying that for me.
I
Yeah.
have a personal question for you. Were any of your characters reflective of people you know in real life?
For me, so like Ariana does have a lot of like my personality, a lot of things like I had to work through. I will say Naomi does have a little bit of my sister in her, not a ton, but definitely a little bit. There have been some, people in my life who may have influenced mildly other characters that I don't really want to get into too much. But I will say that Beatrix is a wish. Beatrix is the wish I had for a sister-in-law, and Brielle is who I wish I was more of, right? Because I'm a little bit more like Ariana. I'm a little bit more meek. I have a very personable, but like in making decisions and things of that stuff, I can be a little bit more timid, where Brielle just doesn't care. She's like, I'm gonna do what I'm gonna do. And then Silas, like I will say Silas did have some traits of my husband, like so some like little things like him collecting rocks and reading like a mystery book about a thing hunting through the woods was like a throwback to Sasquatch, because my husband like loves that and loves chamomile tea. So like there were these little like pieces of my husband in there, which was really fun to write in. But personality wise, like he was very much, I tried to model him over like a Byronic hero, right? Like, so very much like, Mr. Darcy, Mr. Rochester, sprinkle of some anime, because I love anime, some anime like tropes in there.
So that segues nicely into my last big question that I'd had for you. I started reading the book very much as just, this is going to be dark romantasy. And it didn't end up being that. It is at its heart like a Regency romance plot with some really cool like
Yes.
dark fantasy flavoring sprinkled on top.
Yes.
Is that your perspective on it? Is that what you were going for? And what sort of balance between the two were you hoping for, and what do you think you ended up with?
So I was going for, I think it's because I really love historical romance. Like historical romance is probably one of my favorite genres. I read a lot of fantasy, I read a lot of historical romance. And so I was really going for like this epic, like romantic, like, almost like leans a little gothic because we have like the dark secrets and things like that. And he's very brooding and very much in that genre. And then I was trying to like layer in like the fantasy element. So for me, like there's like romantasy and then there's fantasy romance. And so I feel like this book is much more a focus of romance with that sprinkling of fantasy in the fantasy world, where I feel like book 2 kind of subverts a little bit and is more a fantasy with a sprinkling of romance. Because I just, unless you do a Sarah J. Maas and you're just like, okay, like we're scrapping, love interest 1 and going to love interest 2. Like it's very hard to keep on that fantasy romance vibe. And I also, again, like I really wanted to explore a lot of like the after, because I feel like a lot of stories like, and then they lived happily ever after, but we never saw like what their marriage or anything ever looked like, even though they had lots of problems, so my characters, their problems are not resolved because like they got married.
So how do you feel the romance plot affected the fantasy, and how do you feel the fantasy elements impacted the romance plot?
So I felt like with it's very interesting because I wrote what for book 1 a lot. I wrote what I like, right? And I love a lot of will they, won't they. I do really like that, like sullen, like I don't know my emotions. I call them like sad boys. I like that's like my thing, and I know that's not everyone's thing, and that's okay. And I think that the biggest thing I've noticed just with how readers are taking the novel, like kind of like delving into it, is like those who like really love romance, like are able, to consume it, like I think a little bit easier because they're here for those beats, right? They're here for like the who did this to you, and they're here for the pining, and they're here for like the glass clutching and the almost kisses. But I feel like the readers who have come in from strictly a fantasy perspective, it was a little bit of like a slower pace for them because they're like, okay, like just can you kiss already so we can just get to the action. So it was definitely interesting. And I think as my first, if I had done it all over again, I might balance it out a little bit better. Like even now, like I sit there some days and I'm like, should I pull 3 chapters out of this? Like, should I just like cut it and just like cut these 3 chapters out and make it a little faster? And then I remind myself that if I do it, I will probably just never put the book back onto the market and be like, and then we're done. So, it's one of those things where it's like, you just have to, you learn as you go as a new writer and
Absolutely.
like what works well and what doesn't work well and what people like and what people don't like and hope for the best.
Cool.
I hope that
Thank
answers
you.
your question.
It does. Absolutely. Thank you.
And that lends into my last question really well. It's like a little bit of a game.
Yeah.
So thinking about your greatest takeaway for your reader, okay? You wrote a good book when the reader finishes the book and feels blank.
Feels at
I'm
all.
putting you on the spot. So
Yeah,
I'm sorry, I interrupted your answer. Go ahead.
No, it just feels. I think I wrote a good book if someone ends it and feels something, right? That's my goal, is I want that, someone to feel anything. And it's like, because I think a lot of times we can read a book and it could be entertaining. But my goal, like it's interesting, like looking at what my goal is. And I'm actually really glad you asked this question. It's like my goal wasn't necessarily to entertain. My goal was for you to feel. Like I wanted you to come out of that book and be like, I understood a character, I connected with a character, and I felt something. And it didn't have to be Ariana or Silas or Yothea. It could have been Brielle or Beatrix or whomever, but I just wanted my readers to feel something.
So that brings me to a question that I wanted to ask the room, and that was, what character do you feel you connected most with? And I'm asking the whole room.
I mean, definitely Brielle for me. Not gonna lie. Like everything that she did, I'm like, yeah, I see it.
I'm toggling between Brielle and maybe Silas a little bit, only because of the teacher in me just wanting, do you know what I mean? Just really wanting to help and wanting to, that's a tough question. I don't see myself in Ariana. I apologize. I definitely do not. I don't know. But I even like saw little signs of Thea. Do you know what I mean? I feel like in every character, I saw a decision, an action, a feeling that I related to. So I don't know. That's a good question.
And
I
I
mean,
think that's a powerful thing to see yourself in everybody. That's a powerful thing as an author to hear someone say, I related with each person, because isn't that the goal?
Yeah.
And as an editor, I can say that is a big part of what makes a good character is, even if they are an antagonist or a protagonist or, the most tertiary character in the book, if there's some aspect that just about any reader in your target audience can go, I see myself just a little bit in that character. Absolutely well done.
Yeah.
Dawn, what about you?
I wish that I could say a different character, but it's Ariana. I know what it's like to kind of be isolated and sort of have, the whole complicated, we'll say complicated relationship with your mom. And I would not have thought as much until we sat here talking about it. I would have said, I don't really identify with anybody in the book. I just was able to put myself in the place of each person as I was reading about it. But as we've been sitting here talking, and then when we got to the end and her mom passes away, and they never have that time to actually hash anything out, I was like, yeah, I know how that feels. And I wish that that wasn't me. I wish I was like Beatrix. I wish,
I said she's my wish. They're my wishes. Beatrix and Brielle are my wishes, because I feel like I totally identify with Ariana. I poured so much of my soul into her, and just like really tried to drive home what it's like to feel like an outsider. And and it's like, that's who my book's for, and it's like I've thought about this a lot lately. It's like, my book is for people who have felt that, like people who have not felt like they belong in the group, people who have dealt with like that trauma, people who have had those hard feelings, and people who want to like explore those feelings in a a safer version way to form empathy for those people in their life. And so, Dawn, actually, I hate to say it, but you're kind of my ideal reader. So
yeah,
I'm sorry, but also I'm glad that we could connect in this way, and that you can share a part of your heart and I got to share a part of my heart. And to me, that's super special.
And for me, it was Ariana as well, for very similar reasons. And then I think that's why we're friends, actually. It's because we have been known to be the black sheep in a lot of our lives. Because I think it's because we're such deep thinkers and some of the stuff that we've gone through. But yeah, I definitely saw myself in her, especially towards the beginning. But I also saw myself in Silas too, because I tend to overthink things. Like, I always try to do the right thing. And then I'm like, why did I get myself into this? And then like, I'm just overthinking things, and I wish I could be like more like Brielle.
Yeah.
And like, it's like, I hated and loved her all at the same time. I'm like, I don't know, but I wish I could be a little bit more like Brielle.
All I'll say is okay, fine. I'll say it. So I am writing a little novelette for Brielle right now that bridges between book 1 and 2, that I'm hoping to have come out sometime this year. And writing Brielle, it's been very interesting because she has her own flaws, right? Like, her over the top persona to some degree is also like her own camouflage, her own mask. Like, there are, and I like delving into her and getting to talk as her has been one of the funnest things. Like, writing from her perspective has been so much fun.
I'm so excited to read it.
Yeah, it's super. It's just like very short. It's like 12 or 13 like chapters, very, very short. But just once I wrote book 2, I knew like a bridge was required, and my beautiful, amazing street team was like, you should do it. Just write it. Just write more. We want to hear all the things, know all the things. So
that's cool. Exciting. I did have a couple other questions I didn't get a chance to ask yet. It's never completely clear whether Duncan actually knew about his brother-in-law's curse.
He didn't. So I kind of left it ambiguous on purpose, because I wanted the reader to kind of wonder, but he didn't, and he does not. And we I think I delve more into book 2 about just like keeping things hidden, because I know that Beatrix and Silas, I think Silas says it in the like 6th or 7th chapter, where he was waiting for Ariana at the steps to show her his curse, and he's talking about how like all these people don't know about the curse, like he hasn't told them, and yet here he is like foolishly like allowing his feelings for once to guide him, and going to show like this woman like that he doesn't know his curse. So he doesn't know, and I believe how things are going, he still doesn't know. for at least a hot minute.
So he just stumbled on Ariana's curse as a means for monetary gain. He just was like, oh, we're gonna exploit this.
Yeah, he definitely he definitely he also has like some narcissistic tendencies, right? He's like, I'm gregarious and I'm the life of the party, and everyone like over the top. And but behind, like, it's all about his like machinations, his desire for power. Yeah, we'll get more into that too. There's gonna be Beatrix is gonna be having some conversations. So
So the last question I had, maybe I had more than you guys or something. I don't know. Anyway, so there's this whole, the Aurelians created this whole
Mhm.
fear and horror around cursed beings.
Mhm.
When the reality is that if they had worked with children to help them learn how to control their emotions early on, they could prevent all of this from happening.
Mhm.
What was your inspiration for them being able to leech powers and to create this whole dynamic and this whole culture around cursed people being horrible?
I think that I think that these are just like things that happen within society, right? It's like we, different groups, different people are constantly like demonized for, gain. And so I really wanted to play on that like social dynamic. And there is going to be a lot more delving into the Aurelians in book 2, because like things, like I said, the fun part about writing in first person is like you only see what they get to see. But when they get to see more, you get to learn more. And, it's just it's an interesting place to write in first person and not like, third person omniscient. And so there's so much to delve into as to why they made those choices. But I think like I really wanted to play a lot with power, right? We live in a society where like there are huge power like differentials. Like there's like some people are in extreme poverty where other people have extreme wealth, and a lot of times like those people in extreme wealth are really taking advantage of the people in poverty. And so or people who have like, who are neurodivergent, like I am, like, having to be around like neurotypicals who are in power, and there's like these different dynamics. And so I really wanted to play around with just these different power dynamics, and how like for the person who is at, not the top level of the hierarchy, how that could actually feel very draining and very exhausting and very overwhelming, and feeling like the little pieces that you have are constantly being taken away. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yes, it's brilliant.
Totally does.
Absolutely brilliant.
I'm also just fascinated by how much you and I clearly have in common in the themes that we were exploring and our takes on different stuff. So this has been a very, very fun conversation to have with you.
Yes, for sure. And did you have the new podcast too, right?
Yes. Yep.
If you ever want someone to come on, I will happily talk like book writing as well.
Awesome. That would be fun. I will get in contact.
All right. So since I had Rebecca read your book, now you have to read Rebecca's
book. I know. I was going to say,
I
totally will.
Heart of Flame.
I will.
It's very good. I'm not done, so I cannot tell you if the ending's great, but I can tell you that halfway through is good.
I'm sure it will be great.
Okay, before I ask the closing question, is there anything else that anybody wants to add?
I just want to figure out whose broken mask Theo had. Are we going to find out? That would be an I'm not telling you, right?
I don't know.
So wondering.
Well, I want to say that I thought your twist and your gut drop moments in particular were fantastic. Right. So any of these things that you're a little tight-lipped about, I have no doubt will end up being fantastic twists or gut drop moments.
It's interesting, Mike. Like I said, the best part, like the funnest part about first person is really getting to learn and explore with the character. And I try really hard to write that way. And so you are learning with the character. And book 2 is a lot of learning with the characters. And there are some reveals, there are some twists and turns, and it is a bit of a gut-wrenching just story in general, dealing with all these consequences and this grief and all the things.
And there's like mystery around Ophelia's disappearance. Like, did she do that did she really want
I don't know.
I'm excited too. So
for me being a pantser, it's funny how much stuff I know, but won't know.
Look at Agnes's face. Go ahead, girl.
Oh, I forgot to ask you, when is the next book coming out? I know you told me, but I forgot.
Okay, so ideally it's going to be spring of next year, because again, like I will, as a pantser, I have to make sure everything makes sense. 2, I am very methodical when I write my when I go through my line edits, even though I still make mistakes and I'm not perfect, I try really hard to make my prose sound and mirror that time period, and that just takes a lot of time for me to craft that, right? And so right now I'm like setting the story as I tell my alpha and beta readers. I'm like, it's not pretty yet, please, like don't think it's pretty, like the pros are not there yet, this is just the bones, I gotta add the layers. So if my layering goes well, it will be spring of next year. And then, like I said, I am working on a novelette that should be coming out hopefully this summer.
Any other closing comments?
Keep
All right.
writing. You're brilliant. You're brilliant.
Thank you.
I want to see so much more from you. I think that you are going to go really very far, and I am so grateful that you met with us. And for being a pantser, your books are beautifully melded together. It's just so well done. And please keep writing.
That's so nice. Thank you.
So my closing question was, how has the response been to your book so far from your readers?
So I am a weird author. I do read all my reviews, mainly because I like to learn, right? And I think a lot of authors don't read their reviews. But I kind of look at reviews like food. Like, I don't like pancakes, right? So, but my kids love pancakes, so I make them pancakes all the time. Doesn't mean pancakes are bad, just means I don't like pancakes. And the same thing with sushi. My mom doesn't like sushi, but I love sushi. So once I kind of took that perspective with reviews, it helped a lot more. That was like, it's just not going to be like everyone's vibe. It's been pretty well received. And I think like there's definitely like I said, these readers who really like romance, who really like that epic, romantic, sweeping vibe, people who have read, like, really enjoyed like the classics like Pride and Prejudice, Jane Eyre, who like a sprinkling of fantasy. They've all, it's been well received to them. And I would also say people who really like the little Easter egg hunts and foreshadowing, because I do spend a lot of time working with the scene, right? I use a lot of the scene and how I portray a certain time. I cast shadows for foreshadowing on people, and like even use certain phrases or certain words, to show you what's going to happen in the future. And so the readers who really enjoyed that really liked it, and because they felt like very immersed in the world. So it, like I said, it's been primarily good. Like it's not going to be for everyone, and like I said, it's just someone's pancake, and that's okay.
I love that perspective. I think that is fantastic.
Thank you. It took me a while to get there, as a baby author does, but once I kind of realized that it was really freeing, and hopefully it'll be someone's sushi. So.
Love it.
Well, anyway, thank you so much for joining me, all of you. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm truly thankful for all of my hosts. I'm especially thankful for Chelle. I really appreciate that you came. I love that you got to be the beginning of my podcast before you even published your book. And now you get to be on my Meet the Author book club. This has just been so great. I am so geeked about it. But anyway, I just wanted to thank you all again. And I had a really great time. I hope you all each did too.
Oh, me too.
Thank you so much.
Chelle, so much.
Thank you, Chelle.
All right.
I felt like, first of all, it drew me in pretty quickly. That for me is huge, because if I get 3 or 4 pages in and I'm like, ugh, then I don't want to finish the book. So this one, you like the main character immediately. Can we all just have a high five for the main character being one we all like?
I have to be honest, this was the first time I have ever read a book like this. In fact, I asked Rebecca even today, I said, can you please tell me the genre again? And she threw out this big genre. And I said, okay, I've read dark, I've read historical, I've never read this all together, but I did. I mean, it held my attention. I'm proud of myself. And I would read a book like this again. And I have to agree with Dawn that I would read the second book, even if I didn't have to. So I'm excited to meet her. And I am, like I said, I've never read a book like this in my entire life. So and I agree. I really did like the characters.
I felt like the spicy scenes were really tastefully done.
That's what because like I sometimes struggle when it's too spicy, like,
right.
Ooh, that was a little much for me. But she had just the right amount where it wasn't uncomfortable and it didn't go on for like 6 pages. Sometimes when it goes on for 6 pages, I'm like, Okay, come
Yeah.
on. Let's go on.
Spiciest I've ever read too, but one of my questions was gonna be like, how did you know how to write sex that way? Like, excuse my language, but just because again, but I agree, very tasteful, very great synonyms.
Very well done. Very, very well done. And so it wasn't, and sometimes sex scenes are so cringe. There's just cringe.
Yeah.
And this was not at all. It flowed with the story. It didn't feel like it was a different story, which was great. It was absolutely valuable to the storyline and important to the storyline too. So that was cool. I'm really excited to meet our author. I think that she's incredibly talented.
Yeah, I agree.
I absolutely loved interviewing her. She has such a bubbly personality. Thank you for joining us on this magical journey through Authors Alcove, the reading nook. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review. And remember, this episode is brought to you by Noadays.com, a company that offers many courses from how to become a freelance writer to proofreading and editing. I have personally taken some of these courses, and I am very happy with what I learned. If you'd like to support me on Patreon, you can find the affiliate link in the show notes. I would love for you to join me on my other 2 podcasts as well, Authors Alcove, The Writing Corner, where we talk about everything writing, publishing, and marketing, as well as Authors Alcove, The Healing Corner, where authors share their books on healing and recovery. Until next time, keep reading, keep dreaming, and we'll see you in the next chapter.